This episode is brought to you by Ursa Minor Outfitters. Folks, I'm absolutely in love with my loon mug. It's handmade, it's an absolute piece of art. Whether it's at the office or at the house, people keep asking to check it out. If you're not a loon fan, they also have other beautiful mugs for wildlife fans of moose, bears, and eagles. They specialize in products highlighting the outdoors and local pride through quality design by local artists. They've even started expanding into items beyond mugs, like apparel, dog accessories, and soon candles and more. They also try to partner and highlight other small businesses, and in some cases, forego profits in lieu of charitable giving to help their community, such as the dog rescue. So check them out, ursaminorouttfitters.com, and enter promo code HikesMikes10 at checkout to receive 10% off your order. And for our four-legged hiking partners, they also have a portable silicone dog bowl and also a sweet over-the-collar dog bandana. Go check them out, ursaminorouttfitters.com, and don't forget to enter promo code HikesMikes10 at checkout to receive 10% off your order. Welcome, everyone, to the Hikes and Mikes podcast. I'm your host, Ivan, and together we'll embark on a weekly journey, connecting with extraordinary hikers from all corners of the U.S. and beyond. As a warm embrace of summer envelops the Northern Hemisphere, we've had the privilege of conversing with remarkable individuals throughout this season. Their experiences and adventures will leave you yearning to hit the trails. And on today's episode, we have a special guest, author and thru hiker Suzanne Roberts, who's releasing a new edition of her book, Almost Somewhere, 28 Days on the John Muir Trail. This new edition includes an afterword by Suzanne, looking back on the ways both she and the John Muir Trail have changed over the past 30 years, as well as a book club and classroom discussion questions and photographs from the trip. You can follow her on Instagram at Suzanne Roberts28. We recorded this episode earlier this summer when Suzanne embarked on her El Camino journey through Spain. In this episode, Suzanne delves into the origins of her John Muir Trail adventure from the pages of Almost Somewhere. She also reflects on some key differences she observed during her most recent JMT trek compared to her first JMT experience back in 1993. Suzanne also imparts valuable advice to inspiring authors who also share a love for hiking. Without further ado, let's jump into this episode with our guest, Suzanne Roberts. Welcome, everyone, to the latest episode of the Hikes and Mikes podcast. I'm really excited. I have author and thru hiker Suzanne Roberts with me today. Suzanne, thank you for joining us on the podcast. Really excited to chat with you about your book, Almost Somewhere, as well as what you're up to nowadays. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, and one of our first questions for all our guests is how they got started hiking and how long they've been doing it for.
I grew up in the city. I grew up in Sherman Oaks, which is just in Los Angeles County, and I was in a concrete jungle, basically. But my parents, even though we didn't have a lot of money, it was really important to them that I see nature. So they took me to the beach a lot, and one of the very first trips that we went on, we didn't have money to go on vacations, but they took me to Sequoia National Park. And we did this sort of small interpretive hikes, and I fell in love, absolutely in love with being in the forest. And then I traveled in junior high with a friend to Yosemite. And then that was just it for me. So even though I didn't hike and spend a lot of time in the outdoors as a little girl, I loved playing in the dirt. I loved collecting insects. And the second I did get a chance to get out into the forest and the mountains, I was hooked. But I didn't really start through hiking until college, when I joined the outdoor club at my college, because my parents were not campers or hikers per se.
Did that outdoors club take you out on backpacking trips or just day hikes?
It did. We went on various backpacking trips, also rock climbing trips, and I learned a lot of skills that way. And then by the time I was a graduate student, this was at Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo, I started leading the trips.
Right on. This book, Almost Somewhere, takes place after you graduated in 1993, and it's your experience on the JMT, the John Muir Trail, with two of your college friends. Can you share a little bit about how that trip kind of came about?
Yeah, of course. So 1993 was was during a recession, and people who were graduating from college at that time were having a hard time getting jobs. And of course, the question always for a recent high school or college grad or high school sometimes is, what are you going to do next? And for me, I had no idea what I wanted to do next. I had graduated with a degree in biology, which I wasn't really well suited for, but I thought maybe I wanted to do something in the outdoors, something with study of life. And a friend of mine suggested, my friend Erica suggested that we hike California's John Muir Trail, which runs 211 miles along the spine of the Sierra. And I thought, oh, that's a great idea. Then I'll have something to tell people, right? Oh, what are you doing now? I'm going to go on a long trip. So we were going to do it together, but she was very athletic and sporty and experienced. And I thought that if I went out there with her alone, I might end up dead. So we ended up inviting another friend, Dion, and Dion was my housemate's girlfriend. So he had asked me to take her because she was suffering from an eating disorder. And we were so young and so naive that we didn't recognize what a danger that could be, bringing somebody suffering from something like that into the wilderness. And so I didn't tell Erica about this because Erica would have said no. And so I sort of ended up being, the intermediary between the two, keeping secrets from each other. It was a typical sort of college drama. And then we picked up a fourth, a guy we picked up in the bar in Mammoth. And we sort of sold the trip as it was going to be a bunch of like hippy dippy fun. And we were just going to be, out there fishing and looking at waterfalls. And the group dynamic was not that. And so, of course, that drove him away, which I was grateful for because we wanted it to be an all women's trip. And so it did end up being the three of us for the majority of the trip.
Yeah, that's one of my follow-up question is nowadays it's common sight to see solo female hikers and female only groups up on the trails and up in the mountains. But back in 93, was that scene vastly different where you guys were kind of unique because there wasn't any all female groups or solo hikers as often as you see now?
Yeah, I mean, back then, as you know, there were just fewer hikers in general. So we would go days and see maybe a handful of other hikers. Now you see hundreds of hikers a day. So things have changed a lot. And back in 1993, the Pacific Crest Trail, which the John Muir Trail runs along a short section of the Pacific Crest Trail, they keep records of the number of, people, the number of women, the number of men. And in 1993, only 13% who were hiking the PCT were women. Now it's 43%. So it has improved greatly. Unfortunately, it's still 86% white. So the gains for people of color have not been made, which is the next place that, needs to change. But when we were hiking, when Jesse left, it was the three of us, we got a lot of questions. Do you have a gun? Aren't you scared? And it was just like, no, we're safer out here than we would be crossing a street or in a parking lot at night or something. And I think it's still true that you're still safer in the wilderness now, even though there's so many more people, in wild spaces. But I see so many solo hikers now, solo female hikers. And it's really wonderful and gratifying to see because I think we saw maybe one or two back then in the month that we were hiking the John Muir Trail. And I've hiked the John Muir Trail a couple of times since, including last summer. So I've seen it change through the years.
I wanted to ask, you got a little bit of pushback on the trail about, are you safe? Do you have a gun? This and that. Was there any pushback before you guys got on the trail?
Well, my parents were worried, of course. So it's hard, I think, for modern day hikers, especially young ones, to realize that there were no cell phones. There's no such thing as the internet. There's no GPS tracking. So our parents didn't hear from us until we found a payphone. And in our case, going from Whitney to Yosemite, it took 3 weeks before we got to call our parents. I think we called the first time from Red's Meadow. And so, there's no tracking. There's none of that. Our parents were all worried. But back then, too, I mean, growing up in the 70s and 80s, we didn't have helicopter parents the way, you hear of now. So I think it was a little bit different. It was like they were used to us going out and playing until it got dark and then coming home. I mean, it's a miracle that any of us survived that. But I think that they were worried. But I think now if a 22-year-old told their parents, I'm going to go on a month-long backpacking trip and you aren't going to be able to hear from me until I find a payphone, I can see at least my friends who have, young people, they'd be like, what? So it's very different. Yeah, it's very different now.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that because a lot of people that you see on through hikes have either the Garmin InReach Mini or some sort of satellite communicator. And back then, you're right. It was just you had to wait until you found a payphone or somebody let you use a phone at their establishment in order to reach out to somebody.
Exactly.
You've seen the progression on the trail of solo hikers and additional hikers as well. The outdoor industry is slowly starting to evolve with not just gear designed for women, but companies, especially outdoor companies that are female focused and female owned. How was it preparing for the hike back in 93 compared to your most recent JMT trail last summer?
Well, as you can imagine, so different. When Almost Somewhere came out, and it came out about 10 years ago, so it's coming out again in a special anniversary edition. When it first came out, people were saying things like, I can't believe they were so unprepared. Like, why were they carrying such heavy packs? Like, why didn't they know what they were doing? Well, because how do you find out everything that you need to know now? You go on the internet. There was no internet. We had to buy guidebooks. We had to use paper maps. We had to know how to use a map and compass, which nobody knows how to do anymore. We were on in 1993 was a drought busting year. We needed our maps and our compass to figure out where the trail was half the time. So it was so different. This past summer when I hiked the JMT, it was just so easy. Everything was easier. I mean, we didn't have to pump the water with the big water pump, We didn't have to throw rocks over pine trees, to hang food from the bears. Like, you have a bear canister now. You have like a little built-in filter in your water, in your water bottle. It's just so easy now, and everything's so light. And I can't imagine trying to carry. I had like 60 pounds on my back. Now I make sure I don't have more than 30 or 35 pounds, which is still heavy because I like to bring a chair and I like to bring a camp pillow. And I'm into my luxury items. Now, I'd never carry a pack. I wouldn't be able to physically, but the trail, it's so much easier just having more access to information and the better equipment.
You bring a great point about the compass. So I've been a weekend warrior. I've done car camping, but this summer I'm doing my first backpacking trips in the North Cascades and in the Enchantments. I do have a satellite communicator, but just for redundancy, I am learning how to use a compass, which seems a little weird that, you have the navigation, of course, but if it fails, you want to have a backup. So it is something that's unique where I do see a lot of people at least attempting to learn and use a compass in case of a bad emergency.
Well, it's a good idea. I mean, who knows? Electronics can always go. And I think this past summer, my husband and I were the only people we saw that didn't have the Garmin InReach. We didn't have anything like that. We're so used to backpacking without it. And I just love paper maps. I love looking at a map and folding it out at night and seeing where we've been and where we're going to go. And I call it old school, but I hope all that stuff comes back with a record player.
I like it. Yeah, I ended up buying a map as well. It's something tangible that you can see, and it's almost like journaling in a sense where you get a track and maybe make notes of things that you found along the way. One of my favorite characters on the trail from Almost Somewhere, Suzanne, was Big Heiny, which you've mentioned was the 60-pound bag that you were trekking across the JMT. Can you share a little bit about how that name came about? And I also want to know, is Big Heiny still around or is she retired?
Oh, no, Big Heiny has been donated years and years ago. Remember, this is 30 years ago. No, because we called our backpacks, we started calling them names because we're so mad at them because they were so heavy. And I started calling mine my big fucking heinous load. And so called her Big Heiny for short. But yeah, I've just started calling her the heinous load. And so then she got a nickname, and there's a scene in the book where I had a tendency to just throw it down because it was too hard to set it on the ground because it was so heavy. And at one point I threw it down in the wrong place and it went rolling. Luckily it was retrievable, but it was rolling down these switchbacks, but I had to go all the way back down to get. And it was things flying out of it, and so I made a lot of mistakes with that backpack. I have no idea. I don't even know when I got rid of it, but I've had 3 or 4 backpacks since then.
Did Big Heiny join you on any subsequent trips after the JMT?
Yeah, some shorter trips. When I went to grad school, I led some backpacking trips through that same outdoor group and some shorter, much shorter trips. But the next time I went on another long trip, I got a new one.
You've mentioned this already, but you've noticed some key differences between 93 and your most recent JMT hike. What were some other additional key differences that you saw both on and off the trail from 93 to present?
Well, I mentioned all the people. The trails are, and it's great that people are on the trails and enjoying them. And hopefully, if people are out recreating, they'll want to protect the wilderness and the environment. But one of the other things I noticed was that the trail improvements. A lot of the places if you read the book, right, you might say, oh no, I'm going to have to go over this really scary log bridge. But I was shocked the last time I did the John Muir Trail. A lot of those log bridges were replaced with, much sturdier type bridges. Interestingly, though, we had such a big snow year this year, and some of those bridges were washed out this year. So they don't even know some of the state of the trail. I mean, there's been a lot of trees that have blown down or trees that have cracked due to snow weight. And a very important bridge that goes over the San Joaquin River is impassable. So you either have to do a mountaineer route, which is not recommended unless you know what you're doing, or you have to go out, and back like over on 395 and come back through. I think you have to go out Bishop Pass and come back in Paiute Pass. So you miss my favorite pass, which is the Muir Pass. But things have changed with the weather. So I like to see that. I like to see that, that sometimes the wilderness, nature wins.
Talking with other guests, Suzanne, I feel like trails like the JMT or the Arizona or the Tahoe Rim Trail, these shorter through hikes tend to lead the hikers to longer and longer through hikes throughout the rest of their lives. Is that something that you experienced? Is after the JMT you kind of started expanding the through hikes for longer and longer journeys?
At the beginning of the John Muir Trail, I thought maybe I'd want to do the Pacific Crest Trail next, which of course is much longer. It's 2,650 miles, I think. But after spending almost a month on the John Muir Trail the first time, I thought that was enough, So I have, right now I'm in the middle of a 550-mile hike, but I haven't done the Pacific Crest Trail. I haven't done the Appalachian Trail, any of the 1,000-mile or 2,000-mile hikes. We've hiked from Yosemite to our house in Tahoe. So I've done that, and I've hiked much of the Tahoe Rim Trail. I've just never done it as a through hike because it's in my backyard. And we've done quite a number of international through hikes now. We hiked across England. We did the West Highland Way in Scotland. For me, I'm a writer, and I like to be able to work. And it's hard. It's hard to, on a through hike to really get the work done. So for me, a month to 6 weeks is a good amount of time.
The one other thing that caught my attention is you're also part of the van life community. And that seems to, especially with this new generation of van lifers, hiking and van life kind of coincide with one another. How did van life come about for you?
COVID. Yeah. I was calling it our pandemic mobile. And our van is not fancy. So it's not like one of those $200,000 Sprinter vans. It's a 1999 Ford Econoline. It's lifted and it's got like a 7.3 liter, diesel engine. So it's a huge beast. And you can hear us coming from a mile away. But it's a really old van. The van's name is Shrek, big green van. Got his own Instagram account, although I've been out of the country, so he hasn't been putting any posts up. But yeah, during COVID, the plan was, my husband and I are both in our 50s now, and the plan was that we would quit our full-time jobs, which we did, and we would travel. Well, then COVID hit. So I had just quit my full-time teaching job. My husband ended up staying on a little bit longer in his college administration job, but our jobs came to an end, and here it was, like nobody could go anywhere. So we bought a van from our friends, Shrek, and we started, going on van trips because you could, even before the vaccine, you could totally isolate. And it is a good way to get to, as you say, to get to hikes or to park it and go for a backpacking trip for 3 or 4 days and come back. And so often when we take a van trip, we have our backpacking gear, we have canoeing gear, we have mountain bikes, we've got all of our stuff with us.
Yeah, a real adventure rig that can take you, and you've been all over the place with it, not just there in California and the Southwest, but I think all the way to South Dakota. Is that the furthest east you've gone?
I think the furthest east we've gone in the van is, Florida. And
Florida,
then,
wow.
Went up to the Upper Peninsula in Michigan, and we've been down to Baja. But, there's been some talk of possibly going up to Alaska in it. We'll see.
Oh, that would be fun. Awesome.
But it breaks down a lot.
Oh.
It does. Like it's an event. It's like a true adventure because it breaks a lot. Yeah.
One thing that I like to ask individuals that live in a very beautiful location or in and around national parks is if they have a weekend that's unexpectedly free, where would they travel to and why would they choose that destination? So if you had a 3-day weekend that came up, where would you take the adventure rig?
We go to the desert a lot. We love the east side. We do. We love to go down to the Mammoth area and Clark's Canyon and Owens River and all that area is so beautiful. But we really love, because we live in the mountains, we love to go to the desert. So we love, if we have enough time, we can go to Death Valley and explore. And the closer desert to us is the Black Rock Desert, which is where they hold the annual Burning Man festival. I did bring Shrek to Burning Man last year, but we like to go there when it's not Burning Man time as well. It's a beautiful place.
Nice. Through this podcast, we've talked to a lot of hikers that sometimes they've developed or have regular summit routine, or maybe it's a end of the hike routine. Sometimes it's a favorite snack or meal, maybe some trail beverages, or even just a moment of zen. Is there a regular custom that you do when you reach your summit or when you make it back out?
No, I just take a shower. I mean, I don't know. It's an interesting thing. I think for me, hiking in the summer, hiking is an everyday activity, and in the winter, I'm either cross country skiing or backcountry skiing or alpine skiing. So it's like my gym. For me, it's just part of my life. Maybe sometimes I'll go further and I'll go up a peak or something, but it just feels so part of my life. It doesn't feel like it needs to have any kind of special ceremony.
We've talked about the evolution of your pack list over the years, going from Big Heiny to what you're carrying now. I am interested, is there any specific luxury items that you tend to take on your trail or on your trips?
I always bring a journal and a pen, and usually an ink refill for my pen. I do take notes while I'm, not while I'm hiking, but, in the evenings and things like that. And so for me, I wouldn't want to go on a backpacking trip without my notebook. The other thing I bring, which some people scoff at, is a camp chair, which they have these amazing, they're made out of like aluminum. They're like, I don't know when they started making these, but we just got ours like a year or two ago. And they are so light, and they like basically, you can get them at REI, and they're called Helio something, and they just kind of pop up, they get put together. You just kind of shake it, and the whole thing, the frame puts together, then you just put the canvas on it. And those things are amazing. And you can also, if it's raining, and you can put them in your vestibule, and you can put your backpack on it, so your backpack doesn't get like flooded, because we've been in some rainstorms where there's like 4 inches of rain under our tent. So they're great for that too. So the chair, I love the chair.
I am team chair. So with developing my own pack list, it was between just a foam pad to sit wherever or a chair. And I'm going chair because it's one of those small things that I think once we settle into camp, it would be nice to be able to sit and just relax.
Yeah, it's called, I just looked it up. It's called Helinox is the one that I recommend. The thing about it is that if you're hiking Pacific Crest Trail and you're hiking 25 miles a day, then you should not probably bring a chair. But if you're hiking 10 or 15 miles a day, you're going to have time in camp. You should have a chair.
Yeah.
No question.
I agree. Now, I've also talked to a lot of guests that have had some amazing experiences on through hikes that have mentioned the idea of maybe writing a book about their experiences. Is there any tips or advice that you would have for through hikers that want to share their experiences through a book?
Of course. I'm a teacher, so I love to give advice, especially about writing. I think the most important thing, though, that I want to get across is that I'm not a hiker who wrote a book. I'm a writer who likes to hike. And I think there's a distinction there. Like, I think that in order to write, anyone can write. I mean, anyone can write a book, but to write a good book and a book people want to read, you do have to really learn how to write. And that is a skill, right? Like any other skill. And the best way to teach yourself how to write a book is to read a lot of books, to read widely, to read deeply, meaning look at books that are well constructed and figure out how they put them together. And reading, it just opens up the chance for you to join the conversation. You can't join a conversation unless you know what the conversation is. So reading, also taking classes, you can take online classes, online workshops. You can, there's probably community workshops. I'm actually teaching with Story Studio Chicago. I'm teaching a workshop on the interior and exterior journey of travel writing. It's like a one-off in August. And if anybody's interested too in sort of practicing, I mean, you got to write too, right? The practice of writing. I have a Substack newsletter I send out every Friday that is writing prompts, and it's free to sign up, and you get the first prompt of the month free. And then if you want all the prompts of the month, it's $5 a month. I do a different theme every month. And so I've done the theme of the journey. I've done the theme of the greater than human world, nature. I've done the theme of travel and adventure. So if anybody wants, I can sign up for 52 writing prompts and go back in the archives and get all those writing prompts. They're designed to take 20 minutes. So you can certainly make 20 minutes a day to write. And that might get you started. Yeah.
One of the interactions that I enjoyed reading about on Almost Somewhere was Jim, the individual that joined you guys. But you guys had a really great interaction where you guys were doing, I think, 20 questions. And one of his questions or responses was like, oh, I thought you would have gone to school to be a writer. And you had a really great response where you don't have to go to school or you don't have to get a degree in writing to be a writer. You just almost basically got to write.
You have to write and you have to read books. Yeah. And I do think, taking classes here and there, but you definitely, and this is coming from someone who teaches in an MFA program. You don't have to get an MFA to be a writer, but the MFA gives you the structure and sometimes gives you the validity. Like, I think for some reason, especially with my students, it's really hard for them to say, I'm a writer, for some reason. And all you have to do to be a writer is write. If you write every day, you're a writer.
I like that. Suzanne, we're recording this episode. You're recording this episode from a very unique place. You're in Spain and you're doing El Camino. Can you share with our listeners a little bit about how that kind of came about and how your experience has been thus far?
The Camino de Santiago, we're doing the traditional Camino, which is the Camino Francés. It starts in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-la-Porte in France, and then it goes all the way across northern Spain and ends in Santiago de Compostela. And it's a pilgrimage that's an ancient Catholic pilgrimage, but it was actually probably a pilgrimage before that, like in the Celtic times, which I like. I'm not Catholic, but it is a Catholic pilgrimage, but it's also a very long hike. And it's 500 miles or 800 kilometers, but we're going to actually finish at the ocean. So that's our pilgrimages to the ocean. So we're going to hike a total of 550 miles. Or 885 kilometers. And I think we're 350 miles in, something like that. I hiked 16 or 17 miles today. So my husband and I always sort of heard about the Camino. And, of course, it's been in a lot of popular media. The Way was a movie that was published in 2012, actually doing a sequel to The Way. And it's an interesting through hike. It's not like your typical through hike. You stay at a hotel or a albergue, which is they're like dorms set up for peregrinos or pilgrims, right? And you meet this sort of wacky array of people, and everyone has a sort of different reason, but a lot of people have these spiritual reasons or things they're looking for. So it's been a really interesting experience. And I've done a lot of research on the history, and I'm sure I'll be writing about it. But we are in some really beautiful landscape right now. It rained all day, and we got back into the mountains after the Meseta, which is like just wheat fields for 4 to 5 days. But it's been a really great trip. But we got COVID, at one of the albergues like a week in, and then we had to isolate, which is not easy to do here. But I insisted we isolate for 10 days. And so we didn't really meet anybody because we're staying in apartments and taking extra rest days. And we're fine now. But it was the first time either of us had gotten COVID. So it's just been a really interesting time. It's a long hike, but it's not the kind of hike that I'm used to doing where I sleep in a tent, a sleeping bag, and they're both lovely. But I have to say, I think I prefer wilderness backpacking. But this is great too. I mean, we've met a guy who's 75 years old and he's doing it by himself, the whole thing.
Wow.
And I know there's 75-year-olds doing long hikes in the Sierra too, but it's so much more demanding when you're, camping out every night. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'm glad you brought the movie The Way up because that's how I was introduced to El Camino is through that movie. So I'm excited that they are making a sequel because I feel like that one is a little bit not as well known as others like Into the Wild or Wild with Reese Witherspoon. So that's really great that they are making a sequel to it.
Well, I will say anybody who's thinking about doing the Camino, especially the Camino Francés, it's a mob scene. It's so crowded. And most people only do the last 60 miles or 100 kilometers to get their Compostela, which is like I'm not going to get a Compostela. I've decided I don't want one. I've done the hike. That's enough. But it's like a certification from the Catholic Church saying that you did the Camino. But it's an interesting thing because it is so crowded. And then tour buses are coming and dropping people off. And we see hundreds and hundreds of people on the trail a day.
Wow.
So it might be that the Camino has jumped the shark. I mean, it is like everybody knows about the Camino now. If I were to do it again, I would do the Norte, which is along the north coast, or the Portugues, which starts in Porto in Portugal. And then there's one called the Primitivo, whereas you can camp. Like you can't really camp on the Frances. There's just where you're going to camp in the middle of a wheat field, So, or a vineyard. So if I were to do it again, I would have probably chosen differently. Just the culture is amazing. It is. And the towns have been amazing and the food and wine's great. I love Spain, but it's been really crowded.
A little different from the JMT for sure.
But the JMT's crowded now too. But not as much.
Now, Suzanne, we're halfway through 2023. Are there any upcoming hikes or outdoor goals that you have for the remainder of the year?
Well, we're hoping to finish this hike. If all does well, we'll hit the coast, I think, in 3 weeks. And we've been hiking for 4 weeks. So we're taking 7 weeks, which is a long time for this and we got waylaid a little bit with COVID. So we want to finish this and then we're going to travel a little bit. And then I'm going to teach when I get home. And I'm planning a writing residency, which is basically a month of writing in Alabama. So the rest of this year is going to be work and writing. So probably not until December. December, we might head to Baja in the van. But next year, I'm hoping to do some more long trips.
Now, Suzanne, your new edition of Almost Somewhere is being released on October 21st, and you've added several new features to the new edition. Can you share a little bit about those?
Yeah. So last year, when I was hiking the John Muir Trail with my husband, he'd never done it before. It was a really different experience, as I alluded to. The very first hike, I cried on every pass because it was so hard. And this time I cried on every pass because I was so grateful. And, I was crying at the beauty, right? And just being so glad and grateful that I can still get up these mountains. And it wasn't that hard. And what I've realized over the last 30 years is that for me, hiking and backpacking and long distance is a lot easier now because I've done so many other hard things in my life. I mean, I've buried both parents. I've had good friends my age die. That's nothing compared to, hiking a 14,000 foot peak or whatever. So much of it's mental, so much of it is emotional. And that's what makes it easy or hard. And when I was hiking, I thought, this is so different. I thought, I'd love to write a new afterword of my book that came out, 11 years ago now, was 10 years ago at the time, and it was about a trip I took exactly 30 years ago. So I asked the press, can we do a new edition and I'll add an afterword? And I wanted to change a few things too, because there's certain ways we use language that's really different, as you know, from 30 years ago. And I've become a lot more sensitive to. I wasn't sensitive, like you said, with that Jim character. I was like, oh, he's crazy. Well, you know what? He had PTSD because he was in the Gulf War. So he wasn't crazy. And so I wanted to be able to kind of, allow my older self to come in and say, this is not how I would have written the book now. This is not how I see things now. Also, how about a land acknowledgement? John Muir Trail goes right across the sacred lands of Indigenous people. So my perspective has changed a lot. So I asked the press and they said, yeah, let's do it. So I wrote an afterword where I talk about all of that and some of the things we've talked about here. And I acknowledge that, it was the People's Road, the Indigenous people, and that they were displaced and erased when the national parks were formed. And then I also added some discussion questions because a lot of book clubs and classrooms have used the book. So I added some questions to make it easier for people. And there's a new cover. And as you know, Dion hiked in men's tidy whities, and you can see that on the cover now. And so it'll be out, like you said, in October. And so you can pre-order it now. The audio is still the old book, but I get the rights back next year. And I'm hoping to re-record the audio and read it myself. So we'll see.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
That would be great.
Yeah, it's a memoir. So people like that.
I'm glad you brought up that picture because looking at the cover, I was and reading about Dion's choice of attire, I was like, are those the tidy whities? And sure enough.
They are, yeah. And and a lot of readers wanted photographs. So there are 29 photographs from the original trip are included in the new version. Yeah,
Nice.
so a lot of people on Amazon wrote, "Oh, I wish there were pictures." So you ask and you shall receive. There are pictures now.
Suzanne, they can pre-order it across some of their favorite book retailers right
Yes.
now.
Yes. So if you have a favorite independent bookstore, please, 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 I love to see independent bookstores stay in business, but you can also pre-order it from the Press, University of Nebraska's website, and also, of course, from Barnes & Noble and Amazon and all the places. Yeah.
Awesome. We'll be sure to link those in the episode show notes. This last little section, Suzanne, is the this or that questions. I'm going to give you 2 hiking related topics, and you kind of choose which one do you prefer out of the 2.
Okay.
And the first one is, do you prefer ascending or descending?
Ascending, for sure.
Waterfalls or summits?
Summit.
And switchbacks or straight up?
Oh, switchbacks, for sure.
And trek poles or freehand?
2 trek poles. For sure.
And then this one's a new one, but trail runners or hiking boots?
Trail runners.
And when it comes to your trails, do you prefer a loop trail or an out and back trail?
I think they both have their advantages, but I'll pick loop.
And when it comes to bodies of water, do you jump in or do you stay dry?
I jump in.
Do you prefer sunsets or sunrises?
That's easy. Sunsets. I'm not a morning person. So I love sunrises. I just never see them.
And this one's a tough one because I think you get both of them, but spring flowers or fall colors?
Oh, I'm going to pick both on that one.
And then this one's a bit contentious, but do you tag a hike on social media or do you not tag a hike?
So I think if the hike is already well known, I think it's okay to tag it because it's not like, you're letting out any secrets. But I think if a hike or a camping spot is kind of a local favorite or something that not a lot of people know about, I do not think that you should tag it.
Yeah, I'm getting more and more of those responses, and I think that's a great way to balance it out on social media. For any of our listeners that want to follow your adventures on social media or online, or if they're interested in maybe doing one of your workshops, where's the best place online that they can research or follow along?
Well, my website is SuzanneRoberts.net. And you can find any workshops I'm teaching there. There's also a link to the 52 writing prompts, the newsletter that I do. And I think it links to my Instagram and Facebook. But my Instagram is just Suzanne Roberts 28. And I, put photos and stuff like that on there. And it's public, so anybody can follow along. Yeah.
We'll be sure to add those links as well to the episode show notes so people can follow along. Suzanne, it's been a real pleasure talking to you, and I'm looking forward to finishing Almost Somewhere. I'm really excited to see where things are going to be, because where I'm at right now, there's a shift in the group dynamic that I'm interested in seeing where it takes you guys. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I'm really excited to share this with our listeners.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
And that brings us to the end of this episode alongside Suzanne. We extend a heartfelt thanks to her for coming on the podcast. Make sure to stay connected and follow her upcoming adventures on Instagram at SuzanneRoberts28. Also, make sure to check out the episode show notes for all the links discussed in the episode, and to pre-order the new edition of her book, Almost Somewhere, 28 Days on the John Muir Trail, or be sure to pre-order it at your favorite local bookstore. We have an incredible lineup of episodes planned throughout the summer, and we can't wait to share them with you. New episodes will be dropping every Monday, with occasional bonus episodes on Fridays. To ensure you never miss out on any thrilling tales, remember to hit the like and subscribe button. Your support means the world to us. Don't forget to join our vibrant community on Instagram at Hikes and Mics. We'll be sharing episode visuals, my own personal hiking content, and so much more. Let's stay connected and continue to inspire each other on this remarkable journey. As we bid farewell, remember to tread those happy trails, embrace the great outdoors, and keep the spirit of adventure alive. Until next time, my fellow explorers, happy hiking. A special shout out goes to our incredible audio editor, Alex, whose exceptional skills and dedication help bring each and every episode to life week after week. Thank you, Alex, for your invaluable contribution to the Hikes and Mics podcast. This episode's music was created by Ketsa. Follow him on Instagram at Ketsa Music. This episode is brought to you by Flip Socks. Whether you're on the trail, on the job, or in the yard, Flip Socks will keep Mother Nature out of your boots with their innovative nylon sleeve. You no longer need to worry about any annoying debris getting trapped in your boots during your hikes. Simply flip down the nylon sleeve over any boot to prevent Mother Nature from finding its way inside, keeping your feet comfortable all day long. To get your first pair, visit flipsockswithaz.com and enter promo code HikesMikes10 at checkout to receive 10% off your order. And for listeners who use the promo code at checkout, I'll be donating 100% of the Season 2 promo code proceeds to Big City Mountaineers, who provide transformative experiences through connections to nature that strengthen life skills and build community for youth and disinvested communities across the nation. So if you're tired of bits and pieces of the trail finding its way into your hiking boots, pick up a pair of Flip Socks today with the promo code HikesMikes10 to get 10% off. For website and promo code, see the episode description.